Hi everyone, how are you doing today? Hope you're all having a good evening so far. My name is Ethel Tambadai and I'm the Vice President for the Regents and LTS campus, which is basically this building that you're in. And welcome to tonight's event, What It Takes to Be a Confident Public Speaker. Woo! Tonight we're delighted to be joined by Jenny Garrett, who's a Westminster graduate and an award-winning executive career coach. This is Jenny. Okay. Woo. And Jenny tonight is going to be giving us her insight into what it means to be a confident public speaker and all the reasons why we can all be confident public speakers and the benefits of learning how to do that. Obviously, I'm not. Yeah. Cool. Over to Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I heard Ethel say, how is everybody? But it was a little bit quiet. I need to know I'm not talking to myself. So how is everyone? Yeah? You've got here today. You're ready. Thank you. Okay, better? Can everyone hear me okay? Yes, good. You could hear me even without the mic, couldn't you? Yeah, because I think I was projecting. So, great to be here. I'm ready to share my experience of what it means to be a confident public speaker. I can't speak for everyone. I can only share my own personal story and what I've learned along the way. Now, this was me. Do you see that little girl hiding behind the sofa? Well, that's how I was when I was maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even up to the age of 10. I'd hide behind the sofa and then I'd pop out and say, oh, I'm about to do a speech, listen to me. And I'd make my family line up and listen to my amazing speeches. I have no idea why I had to be behind the sofa. I'm not sure if that was my lectern, my area in which suddenly I was on stage. And my speeches were always about changing the world. I was going to make everything right for everyone. I was going to end world poverty. I was going to make sure everyone had ice cream every day. You know, all the important things I was going to solve. And, my poor family would have to listen. My biggest thing was that I was going to make sure everyone had a washing machine and a fur coat. Because to me, that meant you were sorted. Those were the signs that your life was okay. And I'd share how I was going to do that when I was Prime Minister or I ruled the world in some shape or form. I actually have my mum and my brother tell me that I was almost evangelical. It was a little bit like some preacher about to share what I was going to do and why everyone should follow me. So that's how I was when I was a little girl. So it makes sense that maybe you'd think that I was destined to be a public speaker. And you know what? I was really confident at that age when I was little. I didn't have any doubts. I wasn't afraid. Confidence wasn't a big issue for me at all. Those little voices that you could hear in your head that say, oh, am I going to be good enough? Am I going to be able to speak clearly? Am I going to remember what I have to say? None of those doubts were there. And, I didn't need the advice that people often give. I've got this picture up because it's Homer Simpson in his pants and also lots of other people. And have you ever heard that advice? Picture your audience naked, or at least in their underwear. Have you heard that advice? Yeah. And actually, my daughter's head teacher recently said to me, the advice she was given when she was learning to be a head teacher, when she was to do public speaking, she was told to clench her butt cheeks. So, interesting advice that's put out there into the world, isn't it? Imagine your audience in their underwear, clench your butt cheeks and everything will be all right. Well, I can assure you that's not the advice I'm going to give you today, but I'm going to leave you wondering whether I'm imagining you all in your underwear and clenching my butt cheeks at the same time. So You know, actually, when I tell you about my journey, a journey without self-doubt in the beginning, a journey of me from a very early age, speaking publicly, at least to my family, it makes sense that I would be a public speaker now, doesn't it, really? You know, I have spoken to over 30,000 people. I have spoken in different countries, in Botswana, in America, in Spain, in France, and tomorrow I'm traveling to Oman to speak. I've been on TV numerous occasions. I'm often called on by Sky News and by the radio, LBC Radio and BBC Radio London to speak on topical issues. So speaking is something I do. Speaking is something that I've become paid for. Speaking is a part of my trade. It's become my job. It's become something that is very important to me. And so I've loved doing it. I've learned to love it. I've learned to enjoy it. And that journey from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old to, I won't tell you how old I am now, and being a public speaker sounds like an easy one. But it actually hasn't been, if I'm really honest with you. In my working life, I found it very difficult to have a voice. And I can recall I worked for one of the leading business schools, and being there and actually being really afraid to speak up. Actually thinking, what have I got to say that would be important, that would be relevant, that would be of any interest to anyone? What would I have to say that people would listen to? They'd look at me, they'd be bored, they'd be uninterested, or maybe I'd say the wrong thing, and they'd be questioning what I said in their minds. And while I worked at that organisation, where I think as I worked there, I became smaller and smaller and smaller, a bit like Alice in Wonderland with her potions when she would shrink, I became a very tiny person, a person whose voice wouldn't be loud enough, a person whose voice wouldn't be heard, all because of my own self-doubt. Not because I didn't receive opportunities. The thing was, when I did receive opportunities, I wasn't successful. I floundered. My knees shook, actually visibly shook. Has that ever happened to anyone in the audience? My palms were sweaty. My throat was dry. And actually, my voice quivered. And I forgot what on earth I had to say. You know, usually I could be reasonably eloquent, or at least make sense, but I'd be talking, without things making sense, jumping from one topic to another, not finishing my words, not finishing my sentences. So going from this super confident little girl to a really unconfident woman who wasn't able to speak, who found it so difficult to speak up and actually couldn't get rid of all of those voices, those gremlins in my mind that were telling me I wasn't good enough and I couldn't speak. And actually getting so engrossed in me, that I wasn't really thinking about my audience. I was so busy thinking about what people were thinking about me that I lost all sense of what it was I really wanted to impart. And to be honest with you, in terms of my journey, that journey didn't really completely go away till about 6 years ago. So it's not something that suddenly disappeared and I was super confident. I worked on it. I felt the fear and did it anyway, so I would speak and deliver training and deliver courses, but I still had huge nerves. I still sometimes had the shaky knees, the sweaty palms, the losing track of what it was I wanted to say. But about 6 years ago, I wrote this book. My book is called Rocking Your Role, and it's a guide to success for women who are the main earner in their home. And when I wrote the book, it meant that I had to expose things about myself. I had to expose things about my own life and my own personal situation. It was actually called a taboo subject when I wrote the book, the idea of women being the main earner in their home. And a lot has changed over the last 6 years. Recent research says that now 1/3 of mums in the UK are the main earner in their home. So not so much of a shock, not so much of a taboo, still a minority, and maybe still something that people don't talk about as much, but something that actually is more commonplace. And when I wrote the book, there was such interest in it that I knew people were going to ask me to speak about it. And I wrote a book because I really cared about the topic. And so I wanted to do it justice in terms of me speaking about it. It was really important for me to be able to do that. So I had to kind of step away from being this tiny person to having a voice, to projecting what I wanted to say. And I had to move out of being small to actually standing in my power as a person who wanted to communicate a message. I felt the message was much more important than my fear. I felt the message was something that was so important for me to share that it didn't really matter if I was scared or not. Who here has a message like that? Who here has a passion, something that they really want to speak about? Something, great, how many more? There must be more, yeah. And so when you have something that's so important to you, not sharing it with the world is the biggest crime, isn't it? If something's that important to you and you feel that would be that important to other people, you have to move out of yourself and know that it's something that you need to share no matter what. So I realized I had to move. I had to move from scared to excited. I had to move from frozen to fluid. I had to move from presenter to storyteller. And these are the 3 steps that I had to take in order to become a confident public speaker. So I'm going to talk you through those and how I was able to do that. In order to move from scared to excited, I had to reframe it. I had to think differently. Yeah? Who's been on a roller coaster here? Yeah. You're scared, aren't you? But you're also excited at the same time. Yeah? It's a very fine line between those 2 places. And so, actually, if we frame it as fear, it's much harder to overcome. If we frame it as excitement, we go towards it instead of away from it. So I want to do a little exercise with you, and I'm just going to demonstrate it, and then I want you guys to do it. You're going to point your finger up at the ceiling, and you're going to draw a clockwise circle in the ceiling, and then slowly bring it down, keeping the circle until it's just below your waist. Does that make sense? Yeah? So we're going to do it together. Finger up, point at the ceiling, draw a clockwise circle in the ceiling. Make sure you're going clockwise. Slowly bring it down, keeping your circle going, keeping going clockwise until it's just below your waist. And when it's just below your waist, I want you to look down at it and tell me which way it's going. Someone shout out, which way is it going? Anti-clockwise. How is that happening? Is there something strange going on in this room? Bit of a Bermuda Triangle at the University of Westminster? What is it? What happened? Say that again? You changed your point of view. Beautifully said. You changed your perspective. When we look up, it's clockwise. When we look down, it's anti-clockwise. And it was easy to do, wasn't it? It was just a shift. It was just moving from up above to below. Very much I want you to think about that when you're thinking about moving from scared to excited. If I think about this as the scariest thing I have to do, yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be terrifying. I'm going to be frozen. If I think about this as an exciting opportunity, then I'm going towards it. It's fun. It's going to be okay. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to meet some new people. Before I do a talk, I always think about how amazing these people are going to be that I'm going to meet, how interesting they're going to be, how they're going to ask me brilliant questions, how I'm going to really enjoy the experience. But if I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous, it's going to be terrifying, it's going to be really hard, I'm going to forget what I'm going to say, I'm going to forget what I'm supposed to be talking about, then that's a totally different experience. So think about how can you reframe it? How can you move from scared to excited? And it's as small and easy as doing that exercise we just did. The other thing that really, really helps is to connect with why you're doing it. I can tell you that when I reflect back on the times when I found it really hard to talk in front of groups of people, I wasn't so connected with the message. It wasn't so important to me. I didn't care enough. And if you care enough, you move past all your fears. The idea of me speaking about my book was the thing that helped me because I cared about it. And you know, you move from being a speaker to almost being a conduit. If you think about electricity, it goes through the wires, doesn't it? They're a conduit for it. Well, when I think about my speaking, it's not about me. I'm just the messenger. I'm just the conduit for the message that I feel is important to share. And when you think about yourself like that, then it's less about you and so much more about the message and your audience. So one thing to take away today that you should definitely be reflecting on is, what is your why? Whatever it is, why do I want to talk about that? Why is it important to me? Whether it's about finishing your course, if you're on a course, whether it's about getting the promotion, which will mean that you'll be able to do more important work, whether it's about a change in your community, whether you're talking in your church, wherever it is, why? Why am I doing this? What is the impact I want to make? What difference will it make? And I can tell you, if you're not deeply connected with it, and it doesn't matter to you, it will show. It will leak out, and it will mean that you get very caught up in the nerves and the worry and the fear around it. Now I've got here, think about what the best that can happen is. And I definitely think that. Think about the best, visualize the best, imagine the worst. But I also think you can think about the worst that can happen. There's no problem with that, because the worst thing that can happen to anyone is what? No, that's quite positive. I want the worst thing that can happen. But I agree, you will learn from it. You freeze, even worse than that. Rejection, even worse than rejection. You don't do it again, even worse than you don't do it again. You faint, even worse than fainting. What? What's the worst thing that can happen to anyone? Failure. Oh, who said it? We'll say it again. You die. Right? That is the worst possible thing that could happen to you as a result of public speaking. Now, tell me, how likely is that? It's highly unlikely. I mean, the time will come for all of us, but actually, it's highly unlikely that you will die from getting on the stage and speaking publicly in front of a group of people. And once you know that, once you know the worst thing that can happen is that it's highly unlikely, everything becomes a bit easier. They actually did some research about people's fears, and actually public speaking was above death. People were more afraid of public speaking than dying. Death came third. There's actually a book about it. So, but if you start, if we're thinking about reframing and thinking about what's the worst that can happen and the best that can happen, the worst that can happen is death. And the best that can happen, as this lady said over here, actually is that we do a great job or we learn. We always learn from the experience. The more you do it, the more you learn, the better you can become. So, step one, move from scared to excited, yeah? And I've given you some ways in which you can do that. I love this quote from Nelson Mandela. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but who conquers that fear. Whenever I come to do a talk, fear is my friend. fear is here alongside me. And actually channeling that adrenaline, that fear is a positive thing. We cannot alleviate it. It's part of the process. Anyone who wants to not feel fear, nerves, anything like that before they speak in front of a group of people about something they care about, it's just not going to happen. But if you make fear your friend and you bring fear along with you and you know that this fear is just excitement that's going to take you along the way, then that is what's going to make you a confident public speaker. So I said we move from scared to excited, but we also have to move from frozen to fluid. When I first started speaking, I would stay on the spot. I wouldn't move, because to move would be another thing to think about, and I just couldn't cope with that. I used to ask people if I could sit down, because two things were good about that. No one could see my knees shaking, but it also meant I didn't have to think about my whole body and moving it. That's such a big mistake, because actually your adrenaline has nowhere to go. Moving helps shake out all of those nerves and all of that nervous energy you have. Moving helps you, and it helps your voice. It helps you project. If I'm sitting down in one small space, actually, I've got to do so much more work to get my voice out. When I'm standing up and I'm moving around, it's so much easier to project, see the audience and connect with you. So actually, we can't be frozen. We've got to move out of that. But so many things make us freeze, because our heart can start beating really quickly and our breath can start moving really quickly, and then it's really, really difficult. So I want us to just do a quick breathing exercise together, something that I do often before I speak, okay? And it's really easy. You breathe in for 5, you hold for 5, and then you release for 5. And we're going to try this together, okay? So breathe in. Hold. Release for 5. Was that hard? Was that something you could do anywhere? Yeah? Who would really notice you doing that? No one, would they really? Yeah? I've been at the front of a very crowded room about to go on stage, and I'll do that. And I'll instantly feel calmer, because I'm controlling my breath. I'm controlling it. I'm calming myself down. I'm helping myself to be ready to go on stage. Before you do your next talk, it's so easy for you to breathe in for 5, hold for 5, release for 5. And you can do it more than once. If you still, after you've done it once, you're still feeling, oh my goodness, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, do it more than once. You can do it in front of people, you can do it on the train, you can do it wherever you are. People are not going to notice, and it's really going to help you calm down. The other thing that I do, I want you all to stand up for. I hope you're going to be able to see me. Okay, so this is something someone taught me, and it's apparently something that African tribes have done when they're excited to calm themselves down. And it's actually just to hit yourself, not too hard, but all over your body. So you start with your arms, back and front, and then you do your whole body, all the way down, and then back up again. Okay? Yeah? And then down again. Okay. Right. You can sit down now. You can sit down now. Now, this is something I wouldn't do in front of people. Okay? I'd go to the toilet just before you're about to do your talk and just do this. Because what's happening is all the adrenaline's pumping and it's getting trapped inside you. Yeah? And there's nowhere for it to escape. And your body's getting tense, and maybe it's getting shaky, and maybe your palms are getting a bit sweaty. And if you just go and do that, it helps. It really helps to release some of that energy so it's not pent up inside you with nowhere to escape. The other thing you can do is just jump up and down for a few minutes as well, but I didn't want to make you all do that. So again, just get rid of this nervous energy to move so you don't get to the stage and completely be paralyzed from all of the nervous energy inside you. Now, this idea of being frozen to fluid, I think do experiment with walking around when you are delivering a talk. Do try and move around. You know, your voice is a part of your talk, but it's not all of it. Your body language is a big part of it as well. So think about how you can use your movements. Yeah? You can, 1, 2, 3, or moving from A to B. Yeah? Or you can just make sure that you see everyone by walking around a little bit so they do see you. This idea of being fluid in the moment is really helpful. And it's not just being fluid in your body, it's being fluid in what you say. You might have a script and you might have practiced, which I would definitely recommend, but give yourself permission to go off track or say things in a different way. Too often I've seen people say, I wasn't supposed to say that, or I've missed the bit that I was supposed to tell you. Who would have known? No one knows what you're about to say, do they? So whatever you say is fine. So this idea of being fluid is giving yourself to be you, giving yourself permission to be you, to be free, to speak in the way that works for you, to go off in a tangent if some light bulb moment comes up in the middle of your talk that you think will be helpful to other people. Yeah? Give yourself permission, and once you do that, you can be a lot more fluid. Now, I'm not telling you not to practice, and I'm not telling you not to prepare. Yeah? I think these are really key things. You should know what you're going to say, and you should have practiced saying it. I've done 2 TEDx talks. TEDx talks have to be a certain amount of time, and you have to know exactly what you're going to say. I prepared, I scripted it, I memorized it, I thought about where I was going to move and how I was going to say things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you practice so much that it doesn't matter if you don't keep to it because you know where you're going with it. Yeah? I want you all to cross your arms, just normally how you would. How does that feel? Comfortable? Okay? Yeah? Natural? Easy? Not natural for someone. Someone doesn't like crossing their arms. Okay. I want you now to cross your arms the opposite way. Someone said they can't do it. What else? How does it feel? Strange. Strange, different. What else? Awkward. What else? Say that again? Comfortable for you to do it both ways. Oh, uncomfortable. Okay, thank you. So, this is what it's a bit like. You can release your arms now if you want to. But this is what it's like. When you're preparing your talk and you're saying it over and over again, in the beginning, it might feel uncomfortable because you're thinking, I don't know exactly how I want to say it or what I want to say and how it's going to come across. But if you do it enough, it will become comfortable. Because if I said to you, I'm coming back here to the University of Westminster in 30 days' time, I want you to have crossed your arms the opposite way every day until then, what do you think you'd be telling me? It's easier, isn't it? Yeah, I know how to do it. I don't have to think about it anymore. And that's what you want to do with your public speaking. You want to know your material so well that it doesn't matter. That it's okay. That's okay if you go off track because you can come back to it. That it's okay because you know exactly where you're going. And even if perhaps you did get a bit of nerves, the words would still flow because you've got an idea, you've memorized it so well. So it is important for you to practice and important for you to prepare. And these things are key. People look like they're winging it. They never are. They're not winging it. They have practiced, they have prepared, they know what they want to say, and they've prepared so well that they make it look easy. Don't be fooled. They are practicing and they are preparing. Harvey Diamond said, if you don't know what you want to achieve in your presentation, your audience never will. You know, when you're preparing, think about how you want to leave the audience feeling. Think about what you want to leave them with. Yeah? What is it? You know, is it an interesting bit of knowledge? Is it that they must buy your product? You know, is it that you're the best person for the job? Whatever it is, you need to be thinking, that's how I want them to feel. And in my preparation and the journey that I'm taking them on is going to take them there. It's going to take them to that place. Yeah? So this is very important with your presentation and your preparation. Think, what is it I want to say, but how will that leave them feeling? Not just what will that leave them thinking. Yeah? What is the emotion I want to convey? How will they feel? How should they receive the information that I'm giving them? So we've thought about moving from scared to excited, from frozen to fluid. But also we have to think about moving from being a presenter to a storyteller. Yeah? Who likes stories? Yeah? We've all grown up with them, haven't we? And if you think about every movie you've ever watched, that's exactly what it is, isn't it? It's a story. It takes us with a beginning, a middle, and an ending. There's hardship or trepidation, but usually it comes out good in the end. You take people, a movie takes people on a journey. And so should the talks you do. So should your public speaking. And sharing your own personal experience and sharing your own stories really is what brings them to life. It's really what connects people with you and what you're talking about. This idea of storytelling is huge. And think about it. Think about how many stories you have in your own heads about your own experience. Some people are natural storytellers. I've got friends, they've just got on the bus and gone somewhere. And within those 5 minutes, they've come across 5 stories about the people who were speaking in front of them, about something they saw out of the bus window. Some people are amazing and they just are storytellers. And some people find it a little bit harder. They have to search and delve and dig to find those stories. But nevertheless, those stories are in you. And even if they're not your story, perhaps it's a story you've heard. Perhaps it's a folk tale you've read. That's okay, because it's still a story and will still take someone on the journey. So think about it, not just as, actually, I want to present this information, but I want to tell them a story through this presentation or connect them with a story through my talk, something that helps them come along with me and connect to it. And I can tell you, it's the stories that are memorable. Yeah? You could deliver the most amazing talk, but it's the stories that people remember. When I think about the talks I've done, when people come up to me in the street, they'll say, oh, I remember that story you told about this and that. They won't remember everything I said, but it's because they connected with that story. So make sure your talks have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Think about your favorite movie or the movies that you love or the books that you read and the journey that they take people on. What is it that you love about them? And how can you incorporate that when you're delivering a talk yourself? Speak from personal experience where possible. Now, that connection will be so easy for you. And if you don't have to remember when you speak from your own personal experience, you don't have to memorize lots of data and lots of facts and figures because they're already there, aren't they? You have them. They're already in your memory banks. They're already there for you. And practice, practice, practice. Yeah? People want to know how to become confident in something. Confidence comes after the act. Confidence doesn't come before. Yeah? If you want to become confident at something, you have to do it. You know, when I really wanted to work on my public speaking, I joined Toastmasters. Has anyone heard of them? Yeah? And they're a really good, cheap group. You might even have one in your university, I don't know, where you can practice lots of different types of speeches in a very safe environment. You'll get a buddy to help you through, and also learn just to speak on the spot, to do impromptu talks. So it's a really good way, but that's just one way of doing it, you know? So just take the opportunity. If someone asks you to speak, or if there's an opportunity to speak, stand up and do it. Yeah? It doesn't matter how scared you feel, because actually the more you do it, the more you'll learn from it. The more you do it, the more you'll learn that you will not die from the experience. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. I love this from Mark Twain. It usually takes me more than 3 weeks to prepare an impromptu speech. Don't underestimate the preparation you'll need to do something well, to do this well. You know, it's not shameful to stand in front of the mirror with your script practicing. It's not shameful to record your speech on your iPhone and listen to it wherever you are to get better and better at it. Yeah? This is the way to perfect any craft that you want to be good at. So I want to say one last thing. I want you to speak even if your voice shakes. I want you to speak when your voice shakes. I want you to speak until your voice no longer shakes. And that is the journey to becoming a confident public speaker. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for that really inspiring talk. Kind of inspired me again to remember why I ran for election, to be that voice in different boardrooms, to tell the university why you guys are important and why you should be at the centre of everything. And I'm sure we have some questions in the audience for Jenny. Anybody?
Someone over there.
Yeah, at the back. Cool. There's a mic coming over.
It would be great, as we are talking about public speaking, if you could stand up and introduce yourself as well. It'd be really lovely.
Is it on? Yeah. Cool. My name is Nicoletta. I'm a student here, actually, postgraduate student. I was just wondering, obviously not all of us will be fortunate enough to speak about stuff that we like or enjoy at times. So if you have any tips on that. And my second question was that some of us are foreign students, so English is not our native language. So if you have any tips on that.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So the first one is, even if you're not talking about something you're excited about, you can find a connection into it. And I think, try and think about, for example, why would this matter, or how has it ever mattered to me, or what could make it interesting to me? So I think you have to find your why in it, and you have to sometimes dig deep to find the thing that makes it a bit exciting, but you will have to search for it. So I can't tell you, because I don't know the particular topic and your connection, but I think you just have to do a bit of work around that. Yeah. The second thing is, I would really embrace your uniqueness. So I would even think about, if you're from a different country and it's not your native language, I might share something about where I come from initially. I might even share some words from my own language to bring it in. I think it's unique, and I think it's exciting, and I think it will add flavour to what you're doing. So I would definitely bring it in as part of it, rather than trying to do something in perfect English and doing it as someone else might do it. Do it your way. Okay.
Thank you very much. Anybody?
Hi. Hi, my name's Dipal. I'm actually a student here for History and Politics. One of my main questions was actually, I'm actually very interested in doing public speaking, but I find that my confidence level is kind of lower than what I'd like it to be. So my main question is like, how would you start off? And you know, I'm actually passionate about veganism, which is something I'm doing at the moment. I've set up my own website, currently under construction, and I just want to know, like, if I want to talk about it and make public events, how would I go about it?
Okay, thank you. Good question. I think I would start with safe audiences. So I would definitely think about, so it might be the student body. I'm sure there are lots of vegans, you know, within the university. So I might start with who people I think would be a safe group of people who will be supportive. And then the other thing I always think about is people want you to do well when you're speaking. No one there ever thinks, I hope this public speaker is absolutely useless, you know, and does a bad job. So I think if you think that way, all people want is me to do well, that will help you with your confidence. But thinking about what you want to do, maybe start a meetup group for vegans. You can do it really informally. It could just be a group of few people sitting around talking, or, you know, whatever it is you want to do, share recipes or think about how you advance veganism. So maybe start a little group, a safe space, practice what you want to say with them, see how it's received, and then build up to maybe doing it in a more formal way. So 2 ways, maybe with the student body, but maybe starting a little safe group of good people who support your mission. Okay.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm postgraduate at University of Westminster. My question is, I feel like you gave us a lot of really good tips for how to like get centered and get in front of the room to begin with, but what if somebody asks you a question or interrupts you or does something that throws you off guard when you're right in the middle of public speaking?
That's
like,
fine.
Just
Lovely.
Speaking, how do you get back on track?
Yeah, you know what, I think prepare for things to go wrong. Gosh, I can tell you, I did a talk last year for WOW, Women of the World Festival at the South Bank. I was so excited about it. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. My mic wouldn't work, and they were supposed to be recording it for a podcast, and it just kept on jittering. And then my presentation wouldn't work either. Then they had handouts, and they didn't have enough handouts. So it was a bit, you know, in terms of the things that could go wrong, those sorts of things went wrong. I can tell you what I do. I always have my old technology of my notes and my piece of paper, so that if anything goes wrong, I can go back and just talk through it. I think so. That's one thing I do. I always am prepared for everything to go wrong. So be prepared for that. I think generally people don't heckle you, and that's highly, that's not that likely unless you're doing comedy or something like that. So I don't think that's going to happen. But it's okay to say things. Just say, if somebody starts talking, they're having their own conversation. Is there something that we can all be part of, or and you asked if someone asks you a question you don't know the answer to, I think you could say, that's a really interesting question, I'd have to get back to you on that, not sure how I'd answer that right now. Or you could even throw it out to other people. You could say, does anyone else here have a thought about, what this person has said? So I think you could have those in your back pocket and just think, but not be thrown by it. I think the answer is be prepared for things not to go perfectly, because nothing is perfect, is it? We're imperfect. Every single person is imperfect, and the world technology is imperfect, and that's okay. And I think if you don't expect perfection and just do your best, that will always be good enough. Always, always. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Good. I don't know. Okay. And there's someone here afterwards as well.
Hi, Jenny. Thank you. I thought that was a really inspiring talk. Thank you. My name is Sarah Bennett-Nash. I'm a former student here, law student, and I also am the founder of a company called the Enterprise Vault. I am really interested in doing a TED Talk myself, so I'm really interested to hear your insights, the application process, any sort of great tips you can give us to deliver a phenomenal speech.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So really interesting about the TED Talk that I met a colleague and she said to me, what's next for you? What are you going to do? A couple of years ago. And I said, oh, I don't know what's next, what my next challenge is. She said, have you done a TEDx talk? And I said, no. And she said, well, that's what you should be doing, isn't it? I said, oh, how do I do it? She said, just apply. And I said, oh, okay. And you can just look on their website at the events that are coming up, and you can look far out, so not next week, or it's normally 3 to 6 months away, and then they always have themes, and you can see if you would want to present something on one of their themes, and then you just send an email and just say, I'm interested in doing a talk on this, see your theme, this is my background, would you consider me? And if they will, then they might ask you for a full script, and then they might pass it around a few people and make a decision. Everyone is a bit different, because I have done 2. So the first one I did, that's what I did. I applied. I saw where it was. I thought that's long enough away that I could get some practice in. I applied, and then they came back to me, and I wrote a script and ended up changing it quite a bit, actually. But they wanted me. The second one, they invited me. So they just said they'd seen me talk somewhere, and they invited me directly. So that was a much easier process. How to write a good TED talk? I definitely, the things I said to you are really important. Take people on a journey, mostly a personal journey, for a TED talk, and also talk about one thing. We're all so passionate probably about a million things, aren't we? There's so many things, but you have to say the one thing. You have to talk about that one thing only. So you have to decide what that one thing is and really stick to it, and stick to that message and stick to that point. I think that's really important. So take people on a journey, but don't try and talk about climate change and politics and world peace. If you try and talk about too much, that's not what a TED Talk is. It's about one idea worth sharing, and it's about the one idea that you want to share. And then, once you've scripted it, then it's about practicing, because it is, there is no auto cue. It is about knowing what you want to say and doing it exactly to the time that you've said you will do it to. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Suhair. So sometimes I teach at the university. And you were saying to transform things from a presentation format to a storytelling format. So how can such things be done when it comes to lecturing and giving intellectual information?
Okay, can you tell me what you teach?
At the psychology department.
Psychology?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think there will always be stories and examples of people's experience. And you can talk about it through that. You could even, there's so many ways, you can talk about examples of situations that have occurred in terms of the psychology that the different approaches and theories. There'll always be examples. You could talk about your personal experience of learning it. You could say, when I first learnt this, I found this really challenging because it, maybe doesn't sit with how I saw the world, and this is what I had to do to help me. So you could talk about it from that sense. You could talk about it, sometimes you can illustrate things through something like a movie, psychological approaches and, situations that people experience are often there. They're somewhere. We've seen them somewhere else, haven't we? Whether that's a movie or in a book or through a song or through a poem. So you could perhaps bring something like that into it. Yeah. But I understand you've got a curriculum to get through and it can be a challenge, but a story doesn't have to be long. It could be a minute. It doesn't have to be, half of your whole lesson, but and then you could use it to keep tying back, thinking about that story. Or you could even ask the students to think about a story that resonates with them to illustrate that, perhaps. So it definitely can be done. Okay.
Right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Abu Kamara. I'm a postgraduate student, purchasing and supply chain, Marylebone campus. On a personal point of view, when giving presentations, I believe when you are not prepared, you are likely, to get stuck along the way. Okay, and on the other side, when I do memorize, I tend to stuck. while giving speeches. On the flip side, like if I'm asked to give a toast in a wedding or something, after some few glasses, I feel comfortable. So what would you say about that?
Okay. I'll take that for you, Tom. So there's a few things there. I think you're bringing up a really important point about memorizing. That sometimes if you memorize something, you're so stuck thinking about what the next thing is, what is the next line, or what is it I said I would say, that you kind of can lose your connection in the room. And so I would say that there's memorizing, and then there's moving past memorizing to I just know it. Do you see what I mean? And I think that you're probably at the point, there's this point, I don't really know what I'm going to say. There's this point, which is I've memorized it, kind of, but I've got to keep remembering what it is. And there's this point, which is I know it so well, I don't have to think about it. And I think you need to memorize it to that point. Yeah, I know it so well, I don't need to think anymore. But within that, you also then need to trust yourself, which is, you know what, if I don't say the exact words that I was memorizing, it's okay. So what I often do is I will script my talk. So for example, with this talk, I don't normally talk about public speaking. So I wrote down just, exactly what I wanted to say. Then I made my presentation. And then I just wrote a few bullet points on my presentation. So I almost threw away the script and just had my bullet points, things that would trigger the memory of what I wanted to say. Yeah? So you kind of move past memorizing to a point which is, it's in here, I just need to remember what it is, and I don't have to say it word for word exactly as I initially wrote it. Yeah? Okay?
Thank you for that. We have time for 3 more questions,
Okay.
so if you have questions.
Thank you for the tips. I'm Jiten. I would like to know, what is the best way to ensure your audience remembers your message?
The best way to ensure your audience remembers your message. Okay. There's different ways. I don't know if there's a best way. People, I think if you repeat it quite a few times, and I know that sounds, basic, but good speakers often repeat their message quite a few times. So I said a few times, moving from scared to excited, from frozen to lovely, and the last one was what? Presented to storyteller. So you remembered my message, yeah? So I repeated it quite a few times and I illustrated it. So that's a good way to help people remember your message. It's not a terrible thing to repeat things as long as you're adding to it each time you repeat it. That's one way. Stories are a fantastic way of helping people remember your message as well. So hopefully that's answered your question. Thank you. Oh, please stand up there.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Anna. I'm also a postgrad here. I don't know, is it my problem or maybe a common one? Sometimes I'm feeling like in my head, while I'm thinking, when I'm speaking, I'm thinking faster and quicker than I'm really speaking.
Yeah.
And I really feel that it can affect my message.
Yeah.
Because I'm starting to mess it a little bit. Do you have maybe any tips for this problem?
Yes. I don't know if when it happens in your talk. So for me, breathing really helps.
Yeah.
But also what you might want to do is plan, particularly if you're having that, is plan pauses. So you might say, after the 3rd slide, I'll just breathe for a minute. Just not a whole minute, just breathe. Take a 5 breath. Count for 5 and take a breath. So you might need to do that within your talk. Pauses are very powerful. So you might make a really interesting point, or do a quote or a question and just pause for a minute. Yeah. The other thing is that it depends on what kind of speaker you are. So I like to always add interaction in my talks, and it also gives me a moment to take a step back as well. Because sometimes what we can do is I can hear myself speaking, and I'm speaking and speaking. Are they still engaged? And then we can kind of lose ourselves. So you might want to plan something in, which is asking your audience a question or asking them to do something, which gives you a moment and helps you to slow down as well. So I would say plan pauses or bring some interaction into it, which helps you take a pause yourself.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and breathe.
So we have
Hi.
Good evening. I'm Martina, postgraduate student here. My question is if does the audience and the context affect your preparation and the process you go through before public speaking?
Good question. Does the audience and the context? Well, I mean, what I say is different depending on the audience, absolutely. You know, when I'm speaking, I run retreats. When I prepare what I'm going to say for a retreat full of women in a very relaxed setting at a weekend, to when I'm going into a corporate setting and I've got a big audience of people all dressed in suits. So probably some of what I say in my message and the way I deliver it is slightly different in terms of the language, but the preparation of thinking of a story and the way I've decided to do a presentation, probably not so different. So I think some of the content will change depending on the audience, but the actual method that I've described to you doesn't really change, no.
And that is the final question for tonight. But don't be discouraged, we will be having refreshments after. But for now, please can we all thank Jenny for her amazing talk tonight.
I'd love to try and do a selfie with you all. Can we have a go? I haven't got a selfie stick, but I know these things are possible. Oh, I haven't got everyone, but I've got quite a lot of people. Okay, what are we going to say? What are we going to say?
Excited.
Excited! Woo! You didn't seem excited. Excited! Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.